And I just want to add a little bit more about some of the female saints. They often don't get much of a look in the literature. Very often in medieval literature, it's quite hard to find any women mentioned at all, especially by name. But Ibn Arabi wrote about all of the people that he learned from, and there were several women saints of Al-Andalus in particular that he names, and he describes serving and learning from them and talking about, their spiritual capacities. Both of these, there are two elderly women who lived as renunciants. One was Nuna Fatima of Bint al-Muthanna of Seville. She was in her 90s and she only ate the scraps left by people at their doors. He says, although she was so old and ate so little, I was almost ashamed to look at her face when I sat with her. It was so rosy and soft. I, together with two of my companions, built a hut of reeds for her to live in. So she just lived completely renounced. She was a widow by that point. And she had been spinning either wool or flax, I'm not sure, to make a living. But then she found that her finger was crippled. Her finger was crippled, and she took it as a sign from Allah that she was just meant to beg and just live on scraps. And so people would just feed her whatever kind of leftovers they had. But she was... she had a very great spiritual maqam, and she said that she had been given the Fatiha to work with, and she was able to use the Fatiha in certain ways. She could send the Fatiha to do things. So, for example, a woman came to her and said, my husband has gone to another town. I think he'd gone to Cadiz to marry another woman, and she was really upset about it. And so Nuna Fatima sends the Fatiha to bring the man back. And he describes later, he'd gotten to the town, he was about to go and meet his new wife, and then he suddenly just felt really weird. He felt, something came over and he said, I've got to go back home again. And he turned around and went back home again. Yeah. We don't know what happened afterwards, but
Is there a tomb or something like this?
I wish. I mean, who knows where these people are buried? And many of these people are perhaps in unmarked graves, or perhaps those were shrines that were renamed and turned into Catholic shrines.
Do we know where Ibn Arabi is buried? Probably not.
Yeah, he's buried in Damascus. As far as I know, he's buried in Damascus, yeah. He had also a very interesting experience with Khidr in a town called Rota outside of Cadiz. He's got incredible stories. His writings are full of wild stories. And then there was another lady called Shams of Marchena, also called Mother of the Poor. And Marchena is a town outside of Seville, which we could track it down and just walk around. And in fact, I did look it up, and in Marchena they had found an old farmhouse. They kind of were doing some repair work on it, and they realized it used to be a mosque. Yeah, so I think it's just been turned into an old farmhouse. And I'll give you one more example, a really beautiful example of a female saint of Al-Andalus, whose name has been lost into the sands of time, but she was actually a slave girl of someone called Qasim al-Dawla. And Ibn Arabi describes her as being unique in her time, and she had attained the power to cover great distances quickly. When she was away on her wandering, she would commune with the mountains, rocks and trees, saying to them, welcome, welcome. And what I love about this is he was writing in Arabic. I don't know what language he spoke. I'm assuming it was Arabic, perhaps it was something else. But in Arabic, to say welcome is ahlan wa sahlan, right? It's like family, be like my family. You're like my family. So all in all, I feel like all of this builds a picture of a people who lived in very close relationship with the land, with plants, with animals, but also with mountains, with the soil, with the earth. They had a great awareness about it in a technical, scientific way, and they created this completely unique body of knowledge about how to farm and how to produce, but in a sustainable and wholesome way, because obviously if you don't do it in a sustainable way, a couple of generations on the line, that earth is going to be useless. And I think also for people who have an awareness of deserts, this is something that is really present. If you don't care for the soil, if you don't care for your sources of water and make sure they're replenished, if you waste water, you will end up with a desert. And deserts they can be lethal, they can be very dangerous places if you don't know how to live in them. So it is interesting to be in this place in particular, and to think that this was really thriving, was hugely thriving. It wasn't just the mulberries for silk, it was also oranges, lemons. They had, I'm not sure if they had mandarins, I think they maybe came later. Pomegranates and figs and almonds. They grew cinnamon, they grew sumac, they grew barberry, they grew henna, they grew indigo, they grew madder. So they dyed their clothes in lovely colours as well. They grew hemp and linen and cotton. It feels like they were kind of what we would call hippies today, you know, in a sense. And because of their religious outlook, that was what was bulwarking. That was the bulwark of it. You know, it wasn't just we're going to be in nature and we're going to be growing our food. It was like, look after this because this is an amana. It has been given to you in Quran. They knew Quran. Everybody knew Quran. Everybody studied Quran. That was the basis of their education. So this would have been natural to them. You know, that would have been naturally embedded and woven into their awareness of who they were and how they would relate to the soil. It wasn't something that often you don't see that in writing about as Andalusi history because most of it is written by non-Muslims. So most of them are looking at the sources and they're extracting whatever they want to extract from it and they create their arguments and it's all very interesting. But I think without having that background information, it's very hard to really get under the skin of what it was like to be a person, a Muslim living in this landscape at that time.